A 24-year-old man sat across from me, but he looked like a child. His back was hunched, his head was down, his eyes were fixed on the floor, and not a single word came out of his mouth. He hadn't spoken to anyone in 6 months. He'd lost his family, he'd lost his job, he'd lost himself. And now, with the pen in his trembling hand, he wrote this on the paper. Dr. Bennett, I died when I was 8 years old, but nobody noticed. My neighbor touched me for 4 years. I can still feel his hands on my body. I can still hear his voice. I'm still in that room, and nobody believed me. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just therapy. This was a scream for being heard. 26 years too late. The clock struck 2 p.m. when I heard the knock. Patients who arrive exactly on time are usually the ones who desperately need control in their lives. But when Ethan walked through that door, I realized his problem went far deeper than control. He was 34 years old, tall, but his shoulders were collapsed inward as if trying to make himself smaller. He wore a gray hoodie, jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks, and his eyes were the eyes of someone who had given up. He didn't look at me. Not once. He walked to the chair, sat down slowly, and immediately his hands went to his lap. He gripped his knees so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I've been a psychologist for 20 years. I've seen trauma in many forms. But there was something about Ethan's silence that made the room feel heavier. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of pain. Welcome, Ethan, I said softly. I always keep my voice warm in first sessions. I'm Dr. Sarah Bennett. I'm glad you're here. I know it takes courage to walk through that door. He didn't respond, didn't look up, but after a long, heavy silence, he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I don't know where to start. His voice cracked on the last word. It sounded like it hurt him to speak. And then, as if those few words had cost him everything, he fell silent again. His hands gripped his knees tighter. I waited. Silence, in therapy, can be a gift. Sometimes people need permission to just exist without having to perform. That's okay, I said gently. You don't have to start anywhere, we can just sit here if you need to. He nodded, just barely. His breathing was shallow, quick, like he was trying not to cry. I waited. Silence in therapy can be a gift. Sometimes people need permission to just exist without having to perform. After about 3 more minutes of silence, Ethan reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. His hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped it. He placed it on the table between us, then pulled his hand back quickly, as if the paper burned him. I looked at him. May I read it? He nodded, just barely. I picked the paper and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was small, cramped, as if he was trying to fit too many words into too little space. And what I read made my heart stop. Dr. Bennett, I died when I was 8 years old, but nobody noticed. My neighbor touched me for 4 years. I can still feel his hands on my body. I can still hear his voice. I'm still in that room, and nobody believed me. I'm 34 now, but I'm still that 8-year-old boy. I haven't spoken in 6 months. Not because I can't, but because words betrayed me. I tried to speak 3 times in my life. The first time, nobody believed me. The second time, the person I loved left me. The third time, my own mother called me a liar. So I stopped, and now I don't know if I even have a voice anymore. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Ethan. He was crying, silently. Tears were streaming down his face, but he made no sound. Not a sob, not a breath, just tears. Ethan, I said gently, thank you for trusting me with this. I know this took everything you had. He didn't respond, but his shoulders shook. I want you to know something, I continued. I believe you. Every word, and nothing you say in this room will make me leave. Nothing will make me judge you. You are safe here. He looked up at me for the first time, and the look in his eyes, it was hope. Fragile, terrified hope. Like a child reaching out for something but expecting it to be snatched away. Over the next several sessions, Ethan communicated only through writing. He would arrive exactly on time, sit down, pull out a notebook, and write, and I would read. In the 3rd session, he wrote about the abuse, and what he described, it was one of the most horrific things I've ever read in my career. His name was Robert. He lived 3 houses down. He was 42 years old. Everyone in the neighborhood loved him. He was the nice guy. He helped people with their groceries. He fixed things. He made people laugh. My parents thought he was wonderful. When I was 8, he started inviting me over. "Want to see my comic book collection?" he'd say. And I did. I loved comics. So I went. The first time, it was fine. We just read comics. But the second time he locked the door and he said, "We're gonna play a special game, but you can't tell anyone, because if you do, no one will believe you. You're just a kid, and I'm the adult everyone loves." Ethan wrote 15 pages about what happened in that house. I won't repeat the details here, but it was systematic, it was calculated, it was evil. It happened twice a week for 4 years, every Tuesday and Thursday, and my parents thought I was at his house doing homework or playing video games. And I was too scared to say anything, because he told me he'd kill me, and I believed him. So I just endured. I learned to leave my body. I learned to go somewhere else in my mind. I learned to become nothing. When I finished reading that session's notes, I looked at Ethan. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, and I asked him something I always ask survivors. "Ethan, where is Robert now?" He wrote, "I don't know. When I was 12, he moved to another state, and that was it. It just stopped, but I never stopped feeling it." But what Ethan didn't know yet, what I would discover in our later sessions, was that Robert hadn't stopped. He'd just found new victims. But the truly horrifying thing wasn't the abuse itself. The truly horrifying thing was the last sentence that man said to Ethan: "If you tell anyone, I'll kill you, and no one will believe you, because you're just a kid." And Ethan believed him. Some sessions my patients heal as they speak, but some stories, they never leave my mind. Today, I'm going to tell you one of those lives. If you're listening to this story, and you have things you can't let go of, share in the comments where you're listening from and what's on your heart. I read every comment, I hear every story. If you want to hear more stories that have stayed with me, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If this story touches your feelings, you can support me by liking it. I'd love to hear your story one day too. If you want me to share your story in my next video, you can send it to the email address in my profile. Remember, some stories heal a little when they're shared. Ethan carried that secret for 11 years. He never told anyone. Not his parents, not his teachers, not his friends. He just buried it deep inside and tried to live. But trauma doesn't stay buried. It festers, it grows, it bleeds into everything. When Ethan was 19, he was in his sophomore year at Portland State University. He was studying education. He wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to help kids. Maybe in some way, he wanted to protect other children from what happened to him. He had one close friend. His name was Marcus. They'd been roommates since freshman year. Marcus was the kind of person who made everyone laugh. He was loud, chaotic, full of life. And Ethan was quiet, reserved. But somehow they balanced each other out. One night in October, Marcus came back to their dorm room at 2 a.m. Ethan was still awake, studying. Marcus sat on his bed and said, "Hey man, can we talk?" Ethan wrote, "I should have known something was wrong." Marcus never wanted to talk. "But I was tired, I had an exam the next day. So I said, can it wait until tomorrow?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And that was it. He went to bed. The next morning I woke up and he was gone. I thought he went to class early. But then I got a call from campus security. Marcus had jumped from the roof of the science building at 6 a.m. He left no note, no explanation, just gone. Ethan wrote, "I was the last person he spoke to, and I told him to wait. I told him we'd talk tomorrow, but there was no tomorrow, and I never forgave myself." But you haven't seen anything yet. Because Ethan was about to face the second time in his life where he'd say, "If only I had spoken." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and all I could think about was Ethan's words. I can still feel his hands on my body. In 20 years of practice, I've heard countless stories of trauma. But something about Ethan's case was different. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way he looked at me with those hollow eyes, like he was already a ghost. I found myself angry. Angry at Robert. Angry at Ethan's parents. Angry at every adult who failed him. And I had to remind myself, I can't carry this rage into the therapy room. I have to stay neutral. I have to stay professional. But God, it was hard. I got up at 3 a.m. and wrote in my journal, something I always do when a case gets under my skin. I wrote, how do I help someone who's been betrayed by everyone who was supposed to protect him? How do I make him believe that trust is still possible? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. All I can do is show up, and listen, and believe him. To understand what came next, you need to understand Ethan's mother. Her name was Patricia. She was a real estate agent in Portland. Successful, put together, the kind of woman who never had a hair out of place. But emotionally, she was a fortress. Ethan described her in one of his writings. My mom is the kind of person who doesn't do emotions. When I was a kid and I cried, she'd say, "Stop that. Men don't cry." When I was scared, she'd say, "There's nothing to be scared of, toughen up." She wasn't cruel. She just didn't know how to be soft. Her father was in the military. She was raised to be strong, to never show weakness, and she raised me the same way. This context is critical, because when Ethan finally tried to tell her the truth, her response wasn't just dismissive. It was devastating. After Marcus died, Ethan spiraled. He dropped out of college. He moved back to Portland and got a job at a bookstore. He stopped socializing. He stopped trying. But when he was 25, he met someone. Her name was Claire. She was a customer at the bookstore. She came in every Saturday and bought mysteries. And one day she asked Ethan for a recommendation. They started talking. She was kind, patient. She didn't push him to open up, but she made it clear she was there if he wanted to. After 6 months, they started dating. Ethan wrote, "Claire was the first person who made me feel like maybe I could be loved. Maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair. For the first time since I was 8 years old, I felt safe." 2 years into the relationship, they were planning to get engaged. And Ethan decided it was time. Time to tell her. Time to share the secret he'd been carrying for 17 years. He had no idea that this conversation would destroy everything. He wrote, "We were at her apartment. It was late. We'd had wine. And I couldn't hold it in anymore. So I told her everything about Robert, about what he did, about how it never left me. And when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. And then she said, 'Ethan, this is a lot. I don't know if I can handle this.' I asked her what she meant. And she said, 'I don't know if I'm strong enough to be with someone who's been through this. I don't know if I can carry this weight with you.' And then she left." Wait, don't miss this, because the person Ethan trusted most was about to betray him in the worst way possible. After Claire left, Ethan fell apart, but he forced himself to keep going. He went back to school, finished his degree, and at 29 he became an elementary school teacher in Beaverton, just outside Portland. He was a good teacher, quiet but patient. The kids loved him, and for a while, Ethan thought maybe this was his purpose. Maybe he could protect other children. Maybe he could be the adult he needed when he was 8. But then, in his second year of teaching, he noticed something. One of his students, a 9-year-old girl named Sophie, had started acting differently. She was withdrawn. She flinched when people touched her. She stopped participating in class. Ethan wrote, "I saw myself in her. I knew the signs, so I pulled her aside one day and asked if everything was okay at home. And she started crying. And she told me her stepfather was hurting her. The same way Robert hurt me. Ethan did everything right. He reported it to the principal. The principal called CPS. An investigation was launched. But what Ethan didn't know was that this decision would cost him everything. His career, his safety, and ultimately a child's life. But Sophie's stepfather was a lawyer. A powerful one. He had connections. And within weeks the investigation was closed. Insufficient evidence. Ethan was called into the principal's office and told to drop it. "We can't afford a lawsuit," the principal said. But Ethan couldn't drop it. He kept pushing. He contacted CPS directly. He documented everything. And then one day the stepfather showed up at the school. He threatened Ethan. "If you don't stop this witch hunt, I'll destroy you." Ethan didn't stop. He went to the police, but again, nothing happened. And then 2 months later, Sophie didn't show up at school. Ethan called. No answer. Drove to her house after work. Police cars, ambulance, yellow tape. Sophie had taken a bottle of her mother's pills. She was 11 years old. Wait, don't miss this detail because Ethan wasn't just a victim anymore. He'd become someone who blamed himself for another child's death. Sophie's death shattered Ethan. He was fired from his teaching position. The school claimed he overstepped boundaries and created a hostile environment. He couldn't find another teaching job. No school would hire him. He moved back in with his parents. He was 30 years old, unemployed, and drowning in guilt. One night, he was sitting at the kitchen table with his mother, and he finally told her. He told her about Robert, about the 4 years of abuse, about Marcus, about Claire, about Sophie. He wrote, "I thought maybe, after all these years, she'd understand. She'd hold me, she'd say I'm sorry I didn't protect you." But she didn't. She stared at me for a long time, and then she said, "Ethan, you've always been dramatic. You've always needed attention. This is just another story you're making up because you can't handle your life falling apart." I said, "Mom, I'm not lying." And she said, "You've always been weak. You've always played the victim. I didn't raise you to be like this." And then she stood up and walked away. 3 days later, Ethan tried to tell his father. His father said, "Your mother told me about your accusations. That's a serious thing to lie about, son. Things like that don't happen in families like ours. You need to stop this." But you haven't seen the biggest betrayal yet, because the words that came out of a mother's mouth were about to solidify 26 years of silence forever. Ethan's father, Richard, was a mechanical engineer. Logical, rational, emotionally distant. He wasn't cruel like Patricia, but he was absent. Even when he was physically present, he was mentally elsewhere. Ethan wrote about him, "My dad never hit me, never yelled at me, but he also never saw me. I could walk into a room and he wouldn't look up from his newspaper. I could tell him I got an A on a test and he'd say good. That's it. Just good." When I told him about the abuse, he didn't get angry. He didn't defend me. He just dismissed it, like it was a minor inconvenience, like I was bothering him with something trivial, and that might have hurt more than anything my mother said. After his parents rejected him, Ethan moved out. He got a small apartment in Southeast Portland. He worked part-time at a warehouse. He stopped seeing friends. He stopped answering calls. He stopped existing, really. And then, 6 months before he walked into my office, Ethan stopped speaking. He wrote, "I woke up one morning and I tried to say good morning to myself in the mirror. And nothing came out. Not because I couldn't physically speak, but because I realized, what's the point? Every time I've spoken, I've been ignored, abandoned, or called a liar. Words don't work. Words are useless, so I stopped." For 6 months, Ethan communicated only through text messages and written notes. He lost his job because he refused to speak to his manager. He stopped going outside. He ordered groceries online, and he planned his suicide. He wrote, "I had 180 sleeping pills. I was going to take them all. I had the note written. I had everything planned. But then, the night before I was going to do it, I got a text from an old college friend. She said, 'Hey, I was thinking about you. Hope you're okay.' And I don't know why, but I replied. I told her I wasn't okay. And she called me, and when I didn't answer, she drove to my apartment and banged on the door until I opened it. And she dragged me to the ER, and the ER referred me to you." Wait, don't miss this moment, because the words he wrote on that first piece of paper were the end of 26 years of silence. In our 7th session, Ethan brought his laptop. He turned it toward me and showed me a news article. The headline read, "Former Portland resident arrested for child sexual abuse, multiple victims come forward." The man in the photo was Robert. Ethan wrote, "I googled him last week, I don't know why. Maybe I needed to know if he was still alive. And I found this. He moved to Seattle after he left Portland, and he did it again, to at least 6 other boys. They just arrested him last month, and I could have stopped him. If I had spoken up when I was 12, if I had told someone, those 6 boys, they suffered because I stayed silent." I looked at Ethan. "Ethan, you were a child, you were a victim, you were not responsible for what Robert did to anyone else." He shook his head. He wrote, "But I could have stopped him." "No," I said firmly, "the adults around you could have stopped him. Your parents could have listened, the police could have investigated, but you were 8 years old. You were terrified. You survived. That's all you could do." Now here's the part you won't believe, because when Ethan Googled Robert's name, what he discovered changed everything. Healing is not linear. It's messy. It's painful. It's full of setbacks. Over the next 2 months, Ethan continued to write. We worked on cognitive behavioral therapy. We worked on trauma processing. We worked on self-compassion. But Ethan still didn't speak. In session 12, I asked him, "Ethan, what would it take for you to speak again?" He wrote, "I don't know if I can, Because speaking means being vulnerable, and every time I've been vulnerable, I've been destroyed. What if I told you, I said gently, that being vulnerable isn't weakness? What if I told you that speaking your truth, even when it's terrifying, is the bravest thing you can do? He stared at me, and then he wrote, "But what if no one listens?" "Then you speak anyway," I said, "because your voice matters. Not because of how people respond, but because you deserve to be heard." Hold on. You need to hear this detail, because what Ethan wrote on that paper made my heart stop. In Sec 15, I gave Ethan an assignment. I want you to write a letter to Robert. You don't have to send it, but I want you to say everything you never got to say. The next week, Ethan came in with 20 handwritten pages. He wrote to Robert. He wrote about the pain, the fear, the shame, the years of suffering, and at the end he wrote, "You took my childhood, you took my voice, you made me believe I was nothing, but I'm still here, and you're in prison, and I want you to know, I survived you, and I'm going to keep surviving. You don't own me anymore." When I finished reading, I looked at Ethan, and I asked, "How do you feel?" He picked up his pen, and for the first time he hesitated. He looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. And then, in the quietest, most broken voice I've ever heard, he whispered, "Free." You haven't seen the greatest miracle yet, because 4 months later the first words Ethan would speak to me would change me forever. After that session, Ethan started speaking again. Not all the time, not easily, but he tried. We practiced, we role-played, we worked on finding his voice again. And then in session 20, Ethan told me he was ready to confront his parents. I asked him, "What do you want to say to them?" He said, out loud, slowly, carefully, "I want to tell them they failed me, and I want to tell them I deserve better." The confrontation happened at a family therapy session I facilitated. Ethan's parents agreed to come, though Patricia made it clear she thought it was unnecessary. Ethan sat across from his mother and father, and he spoke. His voice shook, his hands trembled, but he spoke. "Mom, Dad," he said, "when I was 8 years old, a man named Robert abused me for 4 years, and I never told you because I was terrified. But 2 years ago I finally tried, and you didn't believe me. Mom, you called me a liar. Dad, you dismissed me. And that broke me." Patricia interrupted. "Ethan, we've been over this." "No," Ethan said louder now. "You don't get to talk over me anymore. For 26 years I stayed silent because I thought my voice didn't matter, but it does, and you're going to listen." Richard shifted uncomfortably. Patricia crossed her arms. Ethan continued, I needed you to protect me. And you didn't. And when I finally asked for help, you rejected me. And I'm not asking for your apology anymore, because I don't think you're capable of giving it. But I need you to know, I deserved better. And the fact that you couldn't see that, that's on you, not me." It was too late for many things, but there was one more thing Ethan had to do. And this time, he wasn't going to stay silent. 6 months after that confrontation, Ethan called me. It was the first time he'd called instead of texting. "Dr. Bennett," he said. His voice was stronger now. "I wanted to tell you something." "What is it, Ethan?" I testified. Against Robert. The trial was last month. I flew to Seattle and I testified. In front of a courtroom full of people, and I told them everything. And Robert got 40 years. I felt tears in my eyes. "Ethan, I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You gave me my voice back." "No," I said. "You always had your voice. I just helped you remember it." When we thought it was over, Ethan showed me something. And in that Well, part-time, just 3 days a week. I'm working at a youth crisis center, answering phones mostly. Sometimes I still can't talk to people face to face. The anxiety gets too bad. But it's a start. "That's wonderful, Ethan," I said. "Some days are still really hard," he continued, looking down at his hands. "Last week, I had a panic attack at work. I had to lock myself in the bathroom for 20 minutes, and there are still nights when I can't sleep, when the nightmares come back. When I feel Robert's hands on me again. When I feel like I'm 8 years old, trapped in that room." He looked up at me, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "But I'm trying," he said quietly, "and that's more than I could say a year ago. That's not just trying, I said, that's surviving. That's healing, one small step at a time. I also joined a support group, he said, for survivors, and I've been going every week. Last week I shared my story, out loud, in front of 15 people. My voice was shaking the whole time. I had to stop twice because I couldn't breathe. But I did it. And when I finished, 3 people came up to me and said, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one." "How did that feel?" I asked. "It felt like maybe all of this wasn't for nothing," he said. "Like maybe I can turn this pain into something good. Not right away, not completely, but someday." Before Ethan left that day, I wanted to make sure he understood something important. "Ethan," I said, "I want you to know that healing isn't a destination. It's a journey, and it's not a straight line. There will be good weeks and bad weeks. There will be days when you feel strong, and days when you feel like you're back at square one." He nodded. "I know. And that's okay," I continued. "Setbacks don't mean you're failing. They mean you're human. The trauma you experienced, it changed your brain. It changed how you see the world, how you trust people, how you see yourself, and rewiring that takes time. Years, maybe, but every small victory. Every time you speak when you want to stay silent, every time you trust when you want to hide, every time you get out of bed on the days when everything feels impossible, that's progress." "What if I never fully heal?" he asked quietly. "Then you learn to live with the scars," I said. "But scars are proof that you survived. And survival? That's the most courageous thing you can do." 6 months later, when the phone rang, I heard Ethan's voice. For the first time, truly his voice. And what he told me was the real ending to this story. 2 years after our last session, I received a letter from Ethan. He wrote, "Dr. Bennett, I wanted you to know, I'm okay. Not perfect. Not healed completely. But okay, I still have bad days. Last month, I saw someone who looked like Robert at the grocery store, and I had a full panic attack in the cereal aisle. I still have nightmares. Not every night anymore, but they come. I still struggle with trust. I still flinch when people touch me unexpectedly. But I also have good days. Days when I wake up, and I'm grateful to be alive. I have friends now. Real friends who know my story and haven't left. I have purpose. I'm helping kids at the crisis center, not as a phone operator anymore, but as a peer counselor. And Dr. Bennett, I have a voice. And I use it. Thank you for believing me when no one else did. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. You saved my life. Ethan." I keep that letter in my desk drawer, and on hard days when I wonder if this work matters, I read it. And I'm reminded, it does. This story made me rethink some things. Every life, even with its pain, teaches us something. Maybe this story reminded you to look at your own life, your feelings, or the people around you with different eyes. I hope this story helped you understand yourself and others better. I'd love to hear something about you in the comments, to get to know you and your story a little better. If you want to share what's on your mind, you can write to the email address in my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to be notified of the next real-life story. You can turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon. Before we end, I want to ask you a few questions. Take a moment to think about them. What do you think about this story? Does Ethan's journey remind you of anything in your own life or in the lives of people you know? Can wounds this deep truly heal? Or do we just learn to live with the scars? What does healing even mean when someone has suffered this much? If you were Ethan's parent and you learned the truth years later, could you forgive yourself? How do you think Patricia and Richard live with themselves now? What would you say to the 8-year-old Ethan if you could go back in time? And what would you say to the 34-year-old Ethan who walked into my office that first day? Do you believe that speaking your truth, even when it's terrifying, is always worth it? Or are there some truths better left unspoken? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Your perspective matters, your voice matters. And one last thing. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, please share it. Not for views, not for likes, but because somewhere out there someone needs to hear that they're not alone. Someone needs to know that healing is possible. Someone needs to remember that their voice matters. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like Ethan's. Turn on notifications so you never miss one. And if you have a story you want to share, your story or someone else's, send it to the email in my profile. Every story deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and remember, you are not alone.